Today, the transport sector is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions responsible for climate change in Minnesota, accounting for 25% of the state's GHG emissions. Vehicle exhaust not only stinks, but it also kills. Pollution from cars, trucks, planes, trains and boats seriously affects public health and our climate. You would have heard from many people that electric cars are better for the future because they will help in reducing pollution. Want to know how? Stay with us till the end of the video to find out. Pollutants from vehicle exhaust cover a wide range, from particulate matter, volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides to other greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. Although their names may sound harmless, their impact on human health when regularly inhaled is disastrous. PM2.5 alone, particles made up of fine inhalable particles, about 30 times smaller than a single hair on your head, cause at least 100,000 premature deaths a year in the United States. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Minnesota Department of Health estimate that particulate matter and ozone pollution are responsible for 2,000 to 4,000 deaths per year in Minnesota. Fortunately, electric vehicles have little or no tailpipe emissions and a multi-pronged method to decarbonise our economy and reduce GHG emissions. Thanks to decades of work by Fresh Energy and its partners, Minnesota is making huge strides both in producing cleaner electricity that emits less GHGs and is powering end-use sectors like transportation. With that cleaner electricity, like the Clean Cars Minnesota move most recently demonstrated. A long-standing priority of Fresh Energy. By encouraging more widespread adoption of electric vehicles alongside active transportation like walking and cycling and increased investment in electrified transit, Minnesota is taking essential steps to meet its GHG emission reduction targets. At the same time, these measures are helping our state improve air quality and build healthier communities, especially those that experience higher amounts of traffic-related air pollution. In 2016, transportation outside the electricity industry and power generation from its long reign are the main source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. This is where electric vehicles come in, offering a tremendous opportunity to reduce GHG emissions. Electric vehicles emit fewer climate change-causing emissions over their lifetime than their gasoline-powered counterparts, even considering mining and battery production early in their life cycle. In fact, electric vehicles offset or eliminate all internal emissions within 6 to 16 months of use. Plus, electric vehicles aren't just cleaner today. Their emissions are decreasing over time as our electricity grid becomes cleaner, both here in Minnesota and across the country. With sensible decisions like not building new fossil fuel infrastructure, life cycle emissions from electric vehicles will only continue to decline, both in operation and in production, as battery and electric vehicle manufacturers and electric vehicle drivers are increasingly using electricity produced from renewable energies. The possibilities for customers to charge their vehicles overnight during off-peak hours are also increasing. For example, earlier this year, Xcel Energy launched its Accelerated at-Home program, which gives electric vehicle owners access to Level 2 charging at home, allowing them to take advantage of cheaper electricity rates overnight when wind power tends to be the most abundant. Gasoline vehicles damage the climate and wreak havoc on public health. Together, on-road and off-road vehicles account for about 44% of total air pollution in Minnesota. This is because gasoline and diesel combustion produces harmful gases like carbon monoxide, particulates and oxides of nitrogen, which contribute to serious respiratory illnesses and even cause premature death. According to a recent study by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, road transportation emissions cause 53,000 premature deaths per year nationwide, making transportation the largest contributor of premature deaths from air pollution. If you've gotten this far, be sure to smash the subscribe button for more awesome content. In Minnesota, on-road vehicles produce about 35% of global emissions of NOx, particulate matter, 20% of volatile organic compounds, and about 5% of fine particulate matter emissions, all of which contribute to ground-level ozone pollution. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Minnesota Department of Health determined as late as 2019 that PM 2.5 and ground-level ozone contribute to up to 4,000 deaths a year in Minnesota and 500 additional hospital stays and 800 additional emergency room visits. Reducing emissions of these pollutants is not only essential to protect the health of Minnesotans, it is also essential to ongoing efforts to tackle discriminatory redlining practices that disproportionately expose communities of colour and other undefined communities to pollution, as they are most often located near busy roads. According to the MPCA models, of all sources of air pollution in Minnesota, 32% of all communities in our state have air pollution risk that exceeds health guidelines. However, communities of colour and underfunded communities experience greater risk than health guidelines at a much higher rate. Among underfunded communities, 46% have air pollution health risks above guidelines. Within communities of colour, that number is 91%. In other words, underfunded communities, and especially communities of colour in Minnesota, are exposed to higher levels of air pollution than the state average. Electrifying our transportation system will bring significant benefits to Minnesota, the Midwest, and the United States as a whole. In nearly every state in the United States, electric vehicles produce fewer emissions than the average fossil-fueled cars. And as our electric grid continues to decarbonise rapidly, electric vehicles will become even more environmentally friendly. Fresh energy will remain present every step of the way, continuing to shape and drive a bold policy for a just carbon-free future that works for everyone who lives in Minnesota. You may enjoy this video here. Until next time, thank you for watching.